Welcome back and thank you for staying with us. Now, Transnet workers affiliated to the United National Transport Union have returned to work today. This after the union and the organization brokered a wage deal. One of the most heavily impacted sectors was the berry industry that was unable to export any product as the country's ports shut down. Let's speak to Justin Mudge now. He's from Berries ZA. He's the chairperson there. He joins us now live just to chat to us about this. Justin, thank you so much for your time here on ENCA. Of course, it's quite a relief that at least now they've come to an agreement and everybody has gone back to work. But tell me, in the 9 or 10 days that the strike continued, how much did the industry lose?
It's very difficult to put a number to that, but what we can roughly say is that there are approximately 80 containers that need to be shipped on a weekly basis, and that equates to somewhere around 150 million per week. It would obviously vary depending on the markets to be serviced, but what we cannot quantify is the reputational damage that the berry industry has suffered in not meeting our obligations to our receivers in the markets that we service.
And that's exactly what I was going to ask you next, in fact, about how your clients have reacted to this. Will they trust you? Did some of them, for instance, threaten to stop doing business with you?
Well, it's never as overt as that. These things are a lot more subtle. And what you just see is that you start losing orders and you don't get to supply. And, you know, the thing that a supermarket or a retailer fears most is an empty shelf, because they make margin on volume. And once you, unfortunately, have a disruption in supply, they will make sure that they shore up their supplies from alternative destinations. And, of course, that's a massive risk to the berry industry. And I guess we'll only be able to quantify the losses once all is said and done and we review the season.
And the backlog, tell me more about that. I mean, that's about 10 days of backlog, and this is, consumer items that do expire. They have a certain amount of time before they start perishing, that they need to get to their destinations, etc. How is Transnet, have they at least discussed with you how they're going to deal with this backlog?
Sure. The principle is to really try and give perishable products priority. And we've requested as an industry and agreed with our fruit industry partners that priority will be given to blueberries in particular, and also to stone fruit, because they're also in a very critical part of their season. But, I mean, it's obviously very reassuring that UNTU has signed a wage agreement with Transnet, but some of the rhetoric that I've seen put out by Sitau is particularly concerning. And we would really like clarity on whether the ports can return to proper service, because obviously we do have a significant backlog that we need to deal with. And the sooner we can do that, the quicker we can return to normal, the more easily we can recover from the current position.
So, Justin, I just want to interest you in a conversation that I had with a labor expert yesterday, and he was saying what he's seeing is that there was a precedence that was set by Eskom employees when they went on strike, and then suddenly other people who work for other parastatals realized that if you stay away for long enough, you'll get what you want. So that's what we saw with Eskom employees when we were subjected to stage 6 load shedding around June, July, right? And so you're seeing all of this trickle down to other parastatals, including, for instance, your Transnet. Are you concerned, as someone who has such an important business in South Africa that goes all the way internationally, in terms of what the reputational damage it does to South Africa, not only your industry, but to South Africa as a whole? I mean, international customers could say, well, who's to say that next year we won't find ourselves in this position again when workers expect another increase?
Well, I mean, it's obviously a huge risk that the state owns these monopolies, and that as businesses in South Africa, we don't have the optionality of sourcing power or port services from another entity. And we would really encourage that these monopolies are challenged. and that there's an opportunity for the private sector to get involved, because ultimately, we do need choices as businesses in South Africa to enable us to run our commercial entities. If you're held to ransom by a single entity and you cannot source alternatives, well, then there's a power struggle that is ultimately going to be to the detriment of the economy. While Labour understands that their opportunities to generate income are directed to other income or other operators, they see that as a loss, and as businesses that potentially see their volume shifted to other organizations that are not on strike, they also see that as a loss of revenue. And that's got to bring balance to the situation so that businesses can thrive in this environment. And we call on the state to create an enabling environment where organizations can and will invest in South Africa to create jobs. I mean, it's significant that two of the biggest berry players in the world have recently invested into South Africa. And these are big organizations, big international organizations that see the potential of the berry industry in South Africa and Southern Africa at large. And if we continue to play the game as we are currently with state-owned monopolies that limit the opportunity for growth and expansion, well, I would see that those entities will probably see that South Africa becomes a less favorable destination to invest in, and they'll take their money elsewhere. And that would be a very, very sad state of affairs for this country that desperately requires employment opportunities.
And just lastly, Justin, speaking about employment and unemployment in your industry because of this strike, is there a threat to loss of jobs?
Well, I'm sure it's very difficult to predict. And farmers in South Africa are resilient, our exporters are resourceful, they will find solutions for the current situation. But undoubtedly, it puts real economic pressure on producers that are already in very troubling times, or with significant headwinds blowing against us. The cost of shipping, the cost of other input costs, diesel, agrochem, fertilizer, it's all really starting to blow against a primary producer. And so we really need the support of our logistics functions to ensure that we don't really face any more, because certainly a lot of new producers will find the current circumstances very difficult to deal with.